Hi, you're listening to the She Speaks, We Hear podcast. This is a platform for British Muslim women to talk about the issues that matter to them. Muslim women have been identified as a hard-to-reach section of society. Our aim on this podcast is to get our voices heard. Hi and salam. Welcome to episode 10 of the She Speaks, We Hear podcast with me, Sharmeen Ziauddin. I hope everybody's doing very well. Thank you to those of you who've been listening to the podcast. We've had some great guests over the last few months, so you can listen back to those episodes. Today we're doing things a little bit differently, as it's more of an informal episode, as we've got Aliya Zaidi on, who is the head of Content Strategy at She Speaks, We Hear, and the both of us will be talking about issues that have affected us recently and simply having a catch up, as well as doing some shout outs to Muslim women we admire, but that part's later. For now, I want to welcome Aliya to the podcast.
Hi Sharmeen, nice to be here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. Just looking forward to the last week before we go into Ramadan, inshallah.
Yes, so if you're not Muslim, you might not be aware that Ramadan is starting next week. I've seen quite a lot of posts actually on LinkedIn about how people and companies can kind of be a little bit more inclusive and aware of some of the constraints that come with Ramadan. So actually, you've mentioned that we can kick off with that, if you like, just to give a little explanation. Ramadan is the month that Muslims fast, 30 days from sunrise to sunset. And this time it is coinciding with the Easter holidays. So for those of you who have children, it's actually quite nice because you can have a bit of a lie in if you're not working. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's like a real, I think, advantage of having Ramadan in the holidays, and of course no school run. So Aliya, are you looking forward to Ramadan?
I am. So last week we did a bit of shopping. We went to a local supermarket, got our dates ready. Actually, my son's teacher is Muslim, so we bought her a little gift. She doesn't know about it yet, so
that's nice.
Hopefully she'll listen to this after I give her the present. But also, it's just so nice that you can get so many more little things. Got her a nice card, and there's just lots of different. Like, it's very different to how we grew up, I think. I just saw today that IKEA has got a new range for Ramadan, which I'm quite excited about. Like, if you want to entertain, you've got like little Moroccan plates, quite nice decor. They've got some napkins, and they sent me an email specifically on Ramadan, which I thought was quite cute. So it's quite nice just to look forward to that time, I think.
So the email marketing is works, clearly.
Well, yeah. I was like, they're trying to sell to me, but actually the stuff is quite nice. So I was like, they're trying to sell to me, but I quite like all of their range. There's the Moroccan range is quite nice, So I was like, actually, I might actually go in. So it has worked. I'm a cynic, but yeah, it did work.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. Yeah, I think the supermarkets, they're quite well prepared, aren't they, for Ramadan? So I think a month ago, I started seeing pictures on Twitter say, actually some people were saying, oh my God, Asda's more prepared for Ramadan than I am. And that's quite funny because they have all the offers on like rice and all these kind of stereotypical products that they think Muslims eat and drink, which a lot of it is useful. Some of it I don't really get, like chili sauce and stuff, and like Bombay mix and stuff like that. I don't really use that in Ramadan much, but chili sauce, yes. But it's just funny, the range of products that we see. But yeah, Ramadan for me does usually include stocking up on freezable items for iftar when we open our fast, but I haven't done that yet. I've been very busy.
What's your go-to? Like I know that a lot of people love fried food, but for me, Ramzan is watermelon and mint feta salad. That's something I always make because it's always really nice. It's got like lots, very hydrating. So I think there's definitely a market for like Ramzan food, but I don't think it's so much of the chili sauce and not for me, not for us anymore. Like chili sauce and rice and chickpeas and things. So
well, it's not going to be that hot. I mean, it might get hot towards the end of Ramadan, but actually it's quite nice that the weather's going to be typically British and typically what you get in April, which is basically no one knows what the weather's going to be like in April, because April is one of those unpredictable months. So I think in the past, Ramadan has had very beautiful weather. Last 10 years, it's been pretty hot. So I'm quite liking the fact that it won't be hot, which is weird because obviously I always want warm weather. I'm one of those people who definitely get, like, I don't get that seasonal disorder that some people get, but I do feel quite blue when it's dull outside, and the sunshine really lifts my spirits. But for Ramadan, I'm quite happy that it's not hot because obviously I'll feel less thirsty. But the other good thing you were mentioning about IKEA and buying stuff is that we can actually entertain this year, because the last two Ramadans have been in isolation, literally. Mosques have been closed. I mean, 2020, obviously, it was a complete write-off in terms of having people over or going to the mosque. But I think 2021 some mosques were open, but people were still quite cautious. So it was not the same thing. There weren't like communal gatherings or iftar parties. I know a few people probably had them, but I think majority of people really avoided those kind of gatherings in the house. But I think this year might be back to normal again.
Well, yeah, and then it's like not super super late like it was for the last couple of years. So I think 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock-ish. I think it's quite a good time. But the other thing is, I think for us, like in terms of the activities, the children's activities are all kind of stopping, which I think is a great reminder of what Ramzan's really about, because it's about slowing down, it's about taking time out to understand what's really important. So that aspect of it, I'm really looking forward to, and especially I think, like you said, coinciding with the Easter holidays, I feel like even that's a sign, like slow down, relax, take your time, get up late. And I think these are all important messages. And that's really the essence of Ramzan, which sometimes we forget and we think it's about the food. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to that chance of like spiritual rejuvenation, that chance just to kind of be a bit more mindful. Yeah, definitely looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
I have to agree with you. Absolutely. Really looking forward to slowing down 100%. These last few weeks have been really intense for me for lots of different reasons. And I'm looking forward to it for that reason, that, yeah, no school, no uniform, no packed lunches, no waking up really early, shouting at the kids to get up. It's definitely an opportunity to pause. And for me, I don't know about anybody else, but I kind of give up TV during the month, which sounds really drastic, but it's actually not, because the fasts are so long. There's not, I mean, I don't watch TV in the daytime like lots of mums and working people. You just don't watch TV in the day. In the evening, with the long fasts, there's not even a lot of time and you're absolutely knackered. And people who've never fasted before, you might think the daytime is tiring when you're fasting, but it's actually, for me, it's as soon as you open your fast and then you sit, I just feel knackered, and it's the whole
Yeah.
day's exhaustion. I literally can't move. I find it very difficult to do anything. So it's very tempting to sit in front of the TV, but it's really the time to kind of just have a cuppa and basically maybe pray and just chill out.
It's interesting what you're saying about TV, because for me, TV is not a massive thing, but social media is a massive thing. So, last few years, I sometimes do like a complete kind of try to reduce my social media time, or try to hold back on just scrolling through Twitter endlessly. And I might try that this year as well, because it just allows you to kind of be a bit more mindful, see the content that you want to see, and just use that time a bit better. Because I feel like so much, for me, that's my vice. So much of my time is just scrolling through news feeds and things.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone on that. Same here. I once gave up Instagram for Ramadan. It was a few years ago. I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, I know.
Oh
It
gosh.
sounds difficult. It does sound difficult, but I think that if I gave up one social media channel, like for example, giving up Twitter, I feel there's a lot of debate and a lot of just endless posting, then maybe Instagram wouldn't be so bad. Like it's nice pictures of food and things like that.
I remember when I gave up Instagram, I just spent more time on Twitter, so it wasn't really particularly useful. But speaking of Twitter, I saw some horrible things on Twitter this morning. So the Ukraine war is going on currently. It's been about a month. It is horrific. The things we've seen on TV and the news has been really upsetting, and heart goes out to the Ukrainian people who've had to flee their homes and who are suffering and have lost their homes, and it's a really devastating sight. Oh yeah, so what I saw this morning on Twitter was a video of this girl naked, being with blood pouring down her face, and she was being kicked by men. The men's faces weren't apparent, and they were speaking in a language which I believe is the language they speak in Ukraine, and the girl was Russian, and it was posted by people who were calling Ukrainians Nazis and all sorts. And I was like, whoa, what is going on? And it was horrible that they're spreading this video around, because that poor girl, it's so awful what that she's going through and how she's been kind of exposed on the internet. It's just really horrible. And it just shows that, there's always two sides to every war. The Ukrainian people are definitely the victims, but what's going on in those cities, you don't really know.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is really horrible, and it's interesting how quickly after COVID had just kind of started on this war, which is so unexpected. As soon as all of the news about COVID started sort of dying down a bit, then we had immediately this kind of response to what's happening in Ukraine, which is absolutely crazy. And seeing the news in and out, it's just like it's. I think it's also. I guess we could talk about the reporting as well. There's a lot more sort of news about it on Twitter and things like that, because people are more sensitive to the fact that it's happening in Europe. It feels closer to home for a lot of people, which I don't know. It feels quite strange seeing all of this and the way it's being reported, especially. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't miss it. From day one, it's been all over every news channel, every newspaper, every website, every company is sending emails about how they're supporting Ukraine. Every school, or most schools, I should say, have had like non-school uniform days supporting Ukraine, or collections or events supporting Ukraine. And I've never seen that for any conflict before, or
Yeah.
any invasion. I mean, if you go back to the Iraq war, obviously we didn't have social media when the Iraq war started back in 2003. And there was a lot of coverage on the news, but it was very much not at the forefront. And yes, I understand Iraq is not in Europe, but that particular conflict, I think, just took over 1 million lives in total.
Mm.
So it's, yeah, the you don't want to compare, but you can't help but compare how the reporting is very different, and many, many, many people of all backgrounds have realized this. And when it comes to refugees, we can see that about over 1 million refugees from Ukraine. I think it's 3 million. They've just kind of been accepted and absorbed, as they should be, by their neighboring countries and non-neighboring countries, very quickly, which shows that, there's no refugee crisis as such in Europe. There's a racism problem, in that there were Syrians, Iraqis, Afghans who were refugees, and millions of them have been displaced. In fact, Syria, I think there's been about 7-8 million people displaced from Syria. I think 1 million of them came into Europe, and many of them are still in camps in Greece and all over the world. So just goes to show that where there's a will, there's a way. When people are in trouble, Europeans can help them. It's about whether you choose to help or not.
And on that issue of comparison, I don't think initially there was a comparison, but it was the actual media that started comparing, and it wasn't just one person or one channel. And so that kind of illustrates that this is not one blip, one mistake, sorry, blah, blah, blah. And so, I mean, we saw a few people kind of apologizing, but the fact that it's happened so many times over and over again shows this is a systemic issue. And the issue is the way that it's the issue to do with how people of color or people from other places outside of Europe are talked about, reported in the media. And the fact that we've got so many examples of it, of that kind of reporting, shows this is much more than about one or two reporters. It's about the whole media landscape, and the system and that needs to be addressed. And I think we've seen apologies from individuals, but there's no addressing of actually this is a systemic issue. What's going on here? Why are so many people, like, for example, I think there was, the idea of the certain weapons are okay, well, we've seen that be used in Syria and that's horrific, but actually to see it used in Europe is something gut-wrenching. Like there's no idea of the humanity.
Yeah, and that was a broadcaster that, I have a lot of respect for, and a very liberal lefty,
Yeah,
you could call. I think it was Matthew Wright who said that. I
yeah.
find that very upsetting when he said that. Why is it gut wrenching in Europe and not gut wrenching in Syria? It's not even that far away, Syria. It's not in Australia. It's only another few thousand
Yeah.
miles south. So it's not at the end of the end of the world. It does really beg a belief, but it keeps happening, which is
Yeah,
really
and
quite
and then
sad.
when we're talking about distance, we have to understand what is it in people's minds that creates that distance, because obviously physically it's not distant, but yet people see what's happening in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq as somewhere really far away, and it's because maybe we've become desensitized to violence, and it is that mentality of like, well, this is a different culture, this is not our culture, and we have put ourselves into boxes. We don't see people for their humanity. We don't have an idea of people's lives in terms of their humanity. We see it in terms of numbers, and we other them, and so there's so many other issues wrapped up in the way the reportings happen.
You know what is the saddest thing for me is the rhetoric that our British newspapers were kind of putting out there in terms of refugees and asylum seekers. Our own Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, used the word swarm to
Yeah.
describe Syrians and Iraqis. And now it's like refugees are the best thing
Mm.
since sliced bread, and we are so wanting them to come into our homes, strangers in our homes, because they are, let's face it, white and not Muslim. Because
Yeah.
you have to be blunt about it. There's no point in glossing over the fact by saying they're not. It's because they have similar culture. No, they don't. They're white and they're not Muslim. They don't. A lot of them don't speak English, and I think it's really great that the Brits, who have always been open-hearted and accepting and tolerant of other culture by nature, they're showing their humanity. It's really some parts of the media who are now supporting that as well. But when it was other people of color, like you said, or Muslims, they were completely the opposite. So that hypocrisy, I think a lot of people have felt. I think all people of color have felt like that. Everybody I've spoken to, everybody on social media that I've spoken to, has pretty much said the same thing, that the discrepancy is so obvious.
The disparity is so clear between the Ukrainian refugees and the way we've demonized refugees in this country, and the language of the language we use, especially about boats. And we can go back to Katie Hopkins as well. We have just completely dehumanized them, and that's part of the problem. And unless we address that, we are not going to move forward at all, because it's kind of been glossed over. Like, in the media, it was just about those individual reporters apologizing for their words. But actually, we need to address the wider systemic issue and ask bigger questions and ask the right questions of why this has happened, and how can we prevent it? Because unless we do that, this conversation isn't really going to go anywhere, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned dehumanizing. At least I think, as I said, the humanity has kind of come to the surface, and that's what's come out of it. That when people pull together, so much can be achieved. Whether it's in England or whether it's in Poland, they have literally opened their arms to strangers, and that is really heartwarming. It's just a shame they didn't do it earlier
No,
to
definitely.
other people who have suffered the same, or if not worse. Moving on from Ukraine, on the 27th, it was Muslim Women's Day, and that is a day celebrated across the world. It's an international thing, started by Muslim Girl, I believe. I didn't know a lot about it, but it's a day of celebration, and also it's in the month of
I
March.
think it's International Women's Day was earlier,
Yeah.
And then they have this other one, which now quite a new thing, which is Muslim Women's Day. But I think it was interesting that like the contrast between them, and I think it's interesting to talk about why we need a specific day for Muslim women or even women of color, and why that needs to be maybe in addition to International Women's Day. I think that's quite interesting. I think that, I saw a lot of LinkedIn posts by a lot of organizations about kind of being more inclusive of women and focus specifically on women's equality. But a lot of those conversations, they kind of forget about the D&I aspect, the diversity inclusion aspect of it, and the fact that a lot of the issues to do with women is to do with intersectional feminism, and creating workplaces that are inclusive of people of all backgrounds. And I think we need to add that additional dimension in when we're talking about inclusivity, because when we're talking about International Women's Day, we're only talking about kind of one protected characteristic, which is gender. But actually, a lot of the issues stem from the intersection of multiple different protected characteristics. And that's something that isn't really spoken about, especially in the workplace, making workplaces more inclusive of people with different backgrounds. That's something that needs to be a louder conversation, because it's 2022 and we still are not really addressing that, I don't think. So I think for that reason, I can see the justification or the reason why maybe this was started, because to recognize the specific challenges of being a Muslim woman in the modern age, and more specifically the intersection between being Muslim and female. That's we can talk about gendered Islamophobia, for example. No, I just think that it's really great to have a day dedicated to that, because of the way that Muslim women are generally perceived in the media. I think it's great to have a dedicated day to celebrate the achievements of Muslim women.
Yeah, I agree. And I looked it up on Twitter earlier today because it was only on the 27th, which is, recent. The first few tweets I saw were just full of negativity, a lot of tweets from men in India who are so anti-hijab, these particular people. And this is not particularly about hijab, this is about Muslim women generally, hijab wearing or non-hijab wearing. But as we know, there has been a lot of Islamophobia in India at the moment. So that just really, this is supposed to be a positive thing. And the first thing you see, and this is the problem with anything related to Muslims, there's always going to be a ton of negativity from different people from around the world, not just around the world, in this country as well. And then you had to really go through the tweets to see some Muslim women talking about it and why they think it's important to have a day like this.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then on International Women's Day, we talk a lot about trailblazers, but I still think that a lot of the time, even from certain feminist circles, we don't really champion Muslim women enough. There's still a very negative perception of the fact that Muslim women, the stereotype, especially of Muslim women. I mean, that's happened a lot in the last few months. We've had a lot of people stereotype Muslim women. I'm thinking of we had First Peter Tatchell, when he was talking about hijab in India. He was saying, well, hijab shouldn't be banned, but it is a sign of oppression. And I just find it really ironic that there are, in 2022, there are still men talking for Muslim women. Allow them to have a voice, allow them to, especially Indian women, they are the best people placed to tell you their experience, at least give them a voice. And then we had, I'm sorry, the name escaped me. Maybe you can remember the guy with the mic, Fabricant, isn't it, with the funny hair?
Oh gosh, yeah, the Boris Johnson spoof, who isn't actually a spoof.
Yeah, so he was like, when we talk about Nusrat Ghani, which is going back a couple of months now. But he was like, oh well, a woman that's not wearing hijab cannot possibly suffer from Islamophobia. And it's like, well, it's just ironic that there's all these men talking over women, talking for women. And obviously, this isn't a society that prides itself on giving everybody a voice, but actually, we've had men kind of shut down and silence the conversation by speaking for Muslim women, instead of allowing them to speak for themselves. So,
yeah, no, I agree with that. It's kind of depressing that as you said, we're in 2022, and this whole oppressive hijab thing is still going on, which we've been hearing about for the last 20 years. Just kind of get over it. Actually, did you hear the Indian Miss World say, was it Miss World or Miss Universe? I forget her name's something. Cool. Okay, actually, I've forgotten her name, but she was asked in a press conference, "What do you make of women wearing hijab?" And I think her agent was like, "Look, she's here to talk about her journey. Why can you not talk about her journey and what she's accomplished?" And the reporter said, "Why don't you let her speak
Yeah, yeah,
first?" And then she said, "You know what? Whatever a woman chooses to wear is up to her. Can you just leave women alone? If they want to wear hijab, let them
yeah,
wear hijab. You're asking me about what other Muslim women are doing." Well, she's not Muslim, this woman, but she basically gave a really good response and saying, "Here you are, kind of hounding me about what I think about what women should wear, and they should wear whatever they want. And you're not asking me about my accomplishments." And then she did a little bit of a minute of how wonderful she is. But you know, it was a great response, and they put her on the spot. The whole clip was such a good portrayal of really this is what happens to women. They, they're not allowed to talk.
definitely. And it's worth noting that what's going on in India is much more than just about women's clothing as well, because obviously we have an example of people saying, well, actually, this is about their freedom, and Muslim women, they should be allowed to wear whatever they want, and the hijab is a sign of oppression. But at the same time, it's much more than just about the hijab, because recently I read that actually there's a lot of colleges in India where women are being prevented from praying as well. So the argument that it comes down to freedom is very strange, because obviously, them praying, that's a completely free choice. So your argument breaks down when you're saying it's about them being oppressed. Actually, it's not about them being oppressed. It's just about Islamophobia. And as with many forms of hate, women tend to face it a lot more because of their visibly Muslim.
Yeah, and I think what makes it really sad is that it's India. It's a country which for centuries has had a tradition of modesty in women, and where Muslims have lived for centuries in their millions, and they have lived peacefully on the whole together. And the fact that now a piece of cloth on a Muslim woman's head is a problem for certain university principals and university policies, that they're not allowed to have their education because they wear a cloth. Their whole tradition is wearing a dupatta over your head for Indian women. So it is such a targeted Islamophobic policy and what can you call it? A strategy to undermine Muslims and to treat them badly. That is unashamedly
Yeah,
Islamophobia and nothing else.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
didn't know about the praying thing, but I guess that's just another way to normalize Islamophobia.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is not even hidden. It's just so stark, so naked, so just obvious that they just and also like going back to India, you're saying like what you said is so interesting because this is India. This is a place which has been priding itself on multiple cultures living side by side, multiple religions, having lots of different forms of spirituality. It's diverse in all of its forms, and to see this in this modern era is just so tragic and so sad. Given India's history, it's not the place you'd expect to see it, and yet here we are.
I was going to say, lead, it always comes from the top, right? Like we see here, Boris Johnson is at the top. Before he even became prime minister, he became foreign secretary. Like his impact is so much that the same rhetoric we've seen over here with Islamophobia and racism and anti EU and all that rubbish, right? It's come because the people at the top perpetuate this stuff, right? And it's the same in India, obviously on a much worse scale, because the Prime Minister of India is the ruling party there is a right wing nationalist party, and the ruler on the top, people will say that he was responsible or allowed the Gujarat riots to happen, which resulted in the killing of thousands of Muslims. So when you have a leader like that, obviously it will have the impact in a place like India, which is all about the masses and mob rule. That's what's going to happen. The normal public who didn't believe in all this stuff and lived happily with their Muslim neighbors, they're going to turn. And it's really
Yeah.
sad. And obviously not everybody's like that, but the ones who are supporting the prime minister, they're going to be, it's brainwashing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's almost impossible to get away from the rhetoric, right? Like it's so all pervasive, that it's absolutely impossible to kind of get away from it. And so then you're going to see that leadership, as you're saying, come from the top, and then you're going to see that same behaviour emulate itself within the people, attitudes towards Muslims, and hate crimes will go up. The same as in this country. When Boris said over his comments or whatever, hate crimes against Muslim women went up. And so I think what's really important here is that we need to understand that when it comes to politicians and leaders, these are not just words. They have an effect. They have a direct effect, and it results in more violence, more rhetoric against Muslims, and people are very targeted. So we have a real world effect, and so it's not just words.
Yeah, and it's deliberate. They don't just pop out of people's mouths, or they're not just written in a column in a newspaper. They're thought out words. Moving on from a very depressing state of affairs in India to some good news. So Riz Ahmed won an Oscar last night at the 2022 Oscars. Actually, they're not 2022. They're like celebrating 2021. But anyway, they took place last night. And yeah, he won. He's the first Muslim to win an award, win an Oscar, and he won it for his for the best short film called The Long Goodbye, which I remember watching a few years ago. I'm sure it came out a few years ago. I don't know why it's in the category now, but I remember it being very emotional, very evocative, very disturbing, just a very moving piece of film. And have you seen it, Aliya?
Yeah, I've seen it. I absolutely loved it. What I loved about it, it was so powerful, but also so relatable as well. There were so many. It had been so well thought out, and there were so many parts of it that, as a Pakistani person, you can relate to the family dynamic, the way that they were talking to each other, and so I just thought it was a very short but powerful piece of cinema, very poignant, and I'm really glad he won actually. But um, I think it's been a long time coming, because I was just thinking there's so many of his films recently that have been really, really amazing. I don't know if you've seen The Sound of Metal.
I haven't. He was nominated last year for that. He didn't win. I think he lost to Anthony Hopkins. So, I mean, fair dues. But no, I have not seen that.
So if you haven't seen that, you have to see that. That's a really amazing. That's one of the films I watched his recently, and everyone should watch that because that's something very unique. Um, it's a real kind of insight into what it's like for someone who's becoming deaf, and what's really effective is the way the sound is used to understand someone's experience. It's really, really good. I definitely recommend that.
So, obviously, the other big hit of the night was the deaf actor winning best. Actually, what did he win? Not even sure. For Coda, he's a deaf actor. He's the first deaf actor to win an Oscar.
Oh
So
wow.
that's really cool. And talking of Riz Ahmed, I remember watching his series, The Night of. I don't know if you've seen that. And I remember binge watching it on an aeroplane actually, because it's like I think it's 8 episodes. It's very serious, and it's about a Muslim guy who kind of gets caught up in. He's accused of murder. I think it is. I watched it. I think many years ago now. That was really good. I think he got a lot of recognition for that, because I think that's when all the streaming sites were doing really well. And I don't think it came out on Netflix. But anyway, anybody who hasn't watched it, you can see Riz Ahmed that is best if you look up In the Night of. And of course, we can't really talk about the Oscars without talking about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, or punching. I think it was a slap, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
I am a massive Will Smith fan. I have loved him since The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which I used to watch when I used to come home from school, and I've watched most of his movies. I love his songs. I love his motivational talks he does on social media. I really, really do adore him. So what happened at the Oscars, I was so disappointed with his behavior. I just felt it was really unnecessary to slap Chris Rock in front of millions of people live. But I do understand that he was very out of order to his wife, but I still can't condone his behavior.
Yeah, I mean, same. So I had quite. I mean, this happened on Sunday night, right? So I had a quite busy weekend, just normal parenting weekend of like talking to my older son about this is not how we express ourselves. This is not how we deal with anger. This is I know you're angry, but this is not how you deal with anger. And then I saw that and I was like, oh my god, toxic masculinity. There's a whole topic here about toxic masculinity, about how do we express ourselves, right? And I understand why he did it or whatever, but I just felt like it was heat of the moment, and just so much to unpick here. But just his words, like he said something about "don't say this to my wife." I mean, it's like immediately it became all about him. But also, I personally, I don't know what you thought, but I didn't really like his Oscar speech because it was so like about me, self-centered. And as you say, I'm a massive fan, and I just feel really sad that this is the way it happened. And because I don't know if you've seen King Richard, but I love that film. Really good film. He definitely deserved the Oscar for that film. And just to have this moment of glory tainted by that, it's just so sad. I'm just more sad for him right now.
Well, I mean, I felt he did say, he did say thank you to I was going to say the Venus family, no, the Williams family for every, he said he mentioned them twice or three times in that
Yeah, yeah,
short speech. So it wasn't, I didn't think it was completely self-centered, but he's winning an Oscar. I mean, it's all about centering him. But I feel uncomfortable that he was dancing to getting jiggy with it and everybody was filming and partying with him like nothing happened. I mean, he slapped Chris Rock. But I do understand that there's some beef between Chris Rock and them anyway. And in the
is there
past,
right?
I think he's made a lot of jokes. I think it was a build up or an accumulation of jokes. I don't think it was just based on one comment. You pointed out something very important, which I hadn't even thought of, is that Will Smith is a role model. Let's face it, he's a role model. He's a normal boy from Philly, as we know, and millions of young men look up to him. I know my son and daughter absolutely adore him. We've even got his autobiography. My son's reading at the moment, and I do worry about what him slapping someone in public and being violent, what implications that's going to have on the people who follow him. I mean, I haven't had this conversation with my son yet because he's at school, but I will be asking him what he thinks. And he's basically, Will Smith is a role model. He's a legend.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I just wonder what effect he'll have. They'll think,
yeah,
yeah, this is a cool thing to do.
yeah.
It's
I mean,
not.
I guess yeah, so for you, it's your son is slightly older, so my son's younger. So, but I was thinking about if he had watched this, what would I say to him? And I just thought it was funny after like weekend of like this is not how we handle our emotions to see that. But I thought what was really interesting is what Denzel said as well. He said the devil comes to you at your highest moment, which I think is really interesting. As we're going into Ramzan, we are kind of reflecting on ourselves, reflecting on sins and how we sin and things like that. And I think what it showed to me is that any one of us can be vulnerable in that moment. We're always walking a fine line between doing the right thing and the wrong thing. And especially that's striking me right now because we're coming into Ramzan. That we always think of like bad people doing sins, but actually all of us are a fine precipice of like we can all tip over at one moment. And for him, that was a moment where he just wasn't thinking. It was an adrenaline rush. In that moment, he did the wrong thing. I'm sure he regrets it. Um,
I mean, if I was Jada at the time, I would be really embarrassed and just like, what on earth did you just do? Do I need defending? Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. From what I hear, I don't know a huge amount about her, but I know about her Red Table Talk and whatever. They have an odd relationship, that's true. But I don't think she needs defending. He obviously thought she did. It was probably he did it more for her than anybody else.
yeah,
And I don't think she appreciated it. But when he won his Oscar, she was looking at him very lovingly and just like like so with pride and stuff. So I don't know if she was angry about it. She looked pretty happy when he was delivering his acceptance speech, which I believe was like about 10 minutes later or something.
Oh, was it 10 minutes
Well, I
later?
don't know if it's 10 minutes
Well,
later, but it
yeah,
was just a short
yeah.
while after.
Well, they showed Chris Rock when he told the joke, and he seemed quite happy, but Jada was obviously very upset. She rolled her eyes, and
She
then it
wasn't
seemed like
upset. She just rolled her eyes. I mean,
rolled her
look,
eyes.
I'll
Let's
tell you
say.
something, right? I've suffered from alopecia. I think it would be very hard for any woman who is
Yeah.
having to be bald because of that, because our hair is such a big part of us. For every woman, regardless of where she's from, it's a massive part of us, our identity, our beauty, everything, right? It's what makes us feminine a lot. And this is why, there's the hijab, which, because our hair is such a big part of our femininity and beauty, there's requirement to cover. So anyway, I think despite knowing how horrific alopecia can be, I still don't think it warranted that act of violence.
Yeah, no, and I guess he could have so easily have protected her with his words, which I just think I think anyone can hit anyone, but I think protecting someone with your words, your humor, your wit, that's just the way to do it.
And he's the king of humor and wit and punchy comebacks. He's Will Smith, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and then he would have made Chris Rock look silly if he had done that. But also, you were saying about protection. That's the part of the Oscar speech that I didn't really like that much, was when he was going on about all of the actresses. I protected this actress. I protected the actress that played Venus and Serena.
I didn't hear that bit. Protected. I didn't hear that bit.
Yeah, if you listen to the whole Oscar speech afterwards, it was quite cringe and kind of justifying, and that I'm in a role where God has asked me to do this.
Oh gosh, I didn't listen to that. I must have heard the short version. So yeah,
you have to listen to the full version.
Okay, I'll do that.
And that's the part that I found really cringe, when he was going, "Well, I'm being chosen by God to protect," and I don't know. It was just really, I found it cringy. I know that some people loved it. I mean, it felt quite like Denzel was like Uncle Phil in that moment. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Coming back to what Denzel said. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very words of wisdom. I think.
Yeah, but that's what you have to remember, that Will Smith is at the age that Uncle Phil was in The Fresh Prince,
Yeah.
so he's grown.
Have you seen the new Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? It's not called Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's called Bel-Air.
My husband's watching it.
Okay.
And I asked if he liked it. He didn't really like it that much, so I haven't watched it. Have you watched it?
I've watched a few clips. It's a 15. My son is 15. He's watching it because he's watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and he's loving it. But he also said he's not allowing his sister to watch it, who's 13, who loves Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He's like, no, she can't watch it. And it's true, because it's a 15. So it's very serious and it's not humorous. And it's weird to get your head around it. But I think once you start watching it, you can kind of disassociate yourself from the original comedy sitcom.
Well, yeah, I think it's because we, our generation, we've just kind of grown up with it. It's very hard for us to see it evolve and change to something different. So maybe if you've never really seen Fresh Prince as much, or you haven't had that like love affair with it, then it's probably fine. But for me, yeah, the original is just like, I don't want to ruin the original with this new version. But anyway, maybe if it's good, I'll check it out. But, yeah.
So we wanted to shout out some Muslim women, given that it was Muslim Women's Day not so long ago. You can start, Aliya. Who do you want to give a shout out to?
So I want to shout out to Areej Abu Ali on Twitter. That's her account name, Areej Abu Ali. She's the founder of Tech SEO Women, and she's the head of SEO. And my background is in digitals and tech, and I never really knew anyone who's either from a Muslim background or an Asian background or anyone of color. So I just thought it was really cool to have somebody in the industry who's working in SEO, and to see the industry evolve and change. And I've seen a lot more Muslim women coming into the industry. A couple of weeks ago, I was just listening to a live about Muslim women in tech. And so for me, as someone who kind of started off in that industry and never really saw any Muslim women, it's just really heartening to see how the industry is evolving. So I wanted to point her out. And if you are interested in tech, that's a good person to follow, definitely. And also, she's also Sorry, I need to mention this because I'm a fan. She's a fan of the Foo Fighters, and Taylor Hawkins passed away at the weekend, so I have to mention that as well. I love the Foo Fighters, she loves the Foo Fighters, and we have to mention Taylor Hawkins passing away because that's really sad.
I don't know who he is. Who is he? Or she?
He's the drummer. He's a drummer for the Foo Fighters.
Oh, I'm sorry
and
to
it's
hear
really
that.
tragic. Yeah, it's very sad. It's just really sad. If you're a fan, I'm a fan. So they're my favorite band. Yeah, they're my favorite band. So.
Okay. Cool. No, I'll put her info in the show notes. I wanted to give a shout out to the newest member of the She Speaks We Hear team, who is our social media coordinator, Humaira Ahmed. And she is a book blogger and overall general lovely person. I've known her for quite a few years now, but now she's helping us with our Instagram, and you may have noticed that we have a lot more sort of content and loads more stories, and that's all down to her. She's working really hard to make our Instagram account more interesting and to try and grow it. So shout out to her, and I will give her Instagram handle actually in the show notes, but it is at Bookish Connections, and so you can visit, follow her if you want to know about new books by authors of color, because I think that's what she specializes in on her book blog. So yeah, that's Bookish Connections. Cool. And I forgot, because my memory is so terrible, we were going to talk about some upcoming things that She Speaks We Hear has.
Yes, so we'll be doing lives. We're doing lives again now. We've got one coming up actually tomorrow. And for anyone who's going to listen to this later, check out our Instagram account, because they will be up there hopefully by the time you listen to this. But also after Ramadan, there's opportunities to do workshops, there's opportunities to join the podcast, to do Instagram lives. Please go onto our website. Please get in contact with us. We are very inclusive. We're very open to discussions. And if you are interested in any of those things, please do join us. You can contact me or any of the team. My handle is Aliya Zaidi on Twitter, or the She Speaks We Hear Twitter account is also good. So yeah, look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, so the event, which will be on Instagram, is a live that Akila, who is our founder, she will be interviewing Dr. Shamila Anwar, scientific innovation in Islam and vaccines. It'll be a Q&A session, so you can catch up with that on our Instagram account. I think there'll be lots of questions about vaccines and boosters, because I know a lot of people have been skeptical about the boosters, and also vaccinations for children, still a hot topic. So that being said, I think we can draw this to a close. Thank you, Aliya, for coming on. It was really fun catching up with you.
Thank you very much. Nice to catch up.
I hope you enjoyed the discussion with Aliya and myself. Apologies for the sound in some parts. Hopefully it didn't distract you too much from the conversation. Thank you all for listening. If you liked what you heard, then please rate and review on Apple, as it'll help others find our podcast. Do follow so your podcast app will update you with the latest episode. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just search She Speaks We Hear. See you next time.